maybe there's something to do with the person that you are, and in terms of the pushing the struggle, in terms of your motivation?
I'll not tell you when I was born because I don't think it's relevant, but I'll tell you that I was born in Kirinyaga. I was raised and went to school there, and up to secondary school. Then came for my higher education in Nairobi, at Nairobi Girls, now known as Moi Nairobi Girls. Then to the University of Nairobi. So my formative years, I spent in my home county, Kirinyaga. And I have a special bond with my home county. When I started working, after my university days, I was posted as a magistrate in Nakuru. That was in July 1981. I worked in Nakuru for 1 year up to 1982 and came back to Nairobi. I worked in the judiciary for 6 years, a total of 6 years. And because I was on contract, 3-year contract, when my second contract ended in July 87, I opted not to have it renewed and I started private practice. While in private practice, I became active in law society politics. That was the time of one party, when Kenya had become a one-party state by law. KANU was the only political party. And this is the time Kenyans were complaining of emasculation of their rights by the single party. KANU had this appetite to swallow everything in sight. They had affiliated the Workers' Body Kotu. It was now a KANU affiliate. They had affiliated the largest women's organization, Maendeleo ya Wanawake, and they announced, the president announced that they would now affiliate the Law Society. And this is because the Law Society was vocal on issues of the rule of law and human rights. So as young lawyers, we protested the Law Society leadership having a cozy relationship with the government of the day. And our agitation within the Law Society saw me, a year later, run for a seat on the Council of Law Society. So my activism was born of trying to protect the independence of our professional body, the Law Society, and it made me and others realize that you do not practice your profession in a vacuum, but it is within a socio-economic and political context. And I was then able to relate that the politics of the day determines the environment in which you work in. So we started asking the government to enlarge the democratic space, to respect human rights, to uphold the rule of law. And because those were the days there was the culture of fear and people were not speaking out, the newspapers would carry our statements daily. We gained prominence in the media. And when KTN came at the beginning of the 90s, we would be headline news on the KBC radio, TV, and on KTN, and on the newspapers. So eventually, when the country returned to multi-party democracy in December of 1991, it was only a natural progression that I get interested in political office, and I sought to vie for the Gishogo parliamentary seat. Although I was well known in Nairobi, it never occurred to me that I could run in Nairobi. I said that having grown up during my formative years in Kirinyaga, my home county, I have this bond. So automatically I went to run for the home seat. And that's how my politics, my political career began. And it was difficult in the sense that although people knew I was an activist, a pro-democracy, pro-human rights activist, and they took me seriously in that work together with other colleagues. My bid was not being taken seriously because I was being told that Ser.3 doesn't elect women, that I can only make my name known, well known, that's the farthest I'll go. But I was determined not just to make my name known, it was already known, I was a household name in Kenya even then. I told them I'm there to get elected. I campaigned the whole of 1992 up to the end of the year when the elections were held, and I emerged victorious. I had to endure gender-based insults, violence, but I persisted, and we carried the day. And from then on, having worked for my people in a satisfactory manner, I suppose, because being re-elected is a vote of confidence. I was re-elected 3 other times, in succession. So for 20 years, I was the member of parliament for Gishogo. I gave it my best. If you go to the Hansard, you'll find that all the years I served in parliament, I was consistently rated one of the top contributors. And if you go to the substance of my contribution, you will see that I was a serious member of parliament, involved in legislative activities, involved in serving my people, availing myself for consultation. I religiously during that period had a specific day every month to sit in the constituency office from morning to evening, seeing people on a first come, first served basis, listening to their issues. That was not the only day I was in the constituency, but that was the day for the open clinic, where you see people, you see groups, you see anybody. My phone was open, people could reach me, if not by call, by text. And I would be able to call back and follow on their issues. So I was not only active in parliament, but also in the constituency. In the course of all this, I was also active on women's issues. In 1992, just before the elections, in May of 1992, we formed the League of Kenya Women Voters, the first ever political lobby group in Kenya, because all the other women's organizations at that time were quick to explain that they were not political, they were just for women's welfare. But the League was formed as an avowed women's political lobby. And we advocated for women getting elected, women's getting space in the political arena, in leadership and in decision making. And we started going to the grassroots to discuss these issues with women. And very quickly, there were many other organizations, especially led by Dr. Wanjiku Kabera, by Professor Maria Nzomo, which now also started preparing women for politics. And very soon, even the women's organizations that had denounced political inclination, they soon joined. And together, even after the 1998 elections, we continued advocating for women's space in politics. We joined hands together in 1997, forming the Women's Political Caucus, which was a caucus of all the women organizations. It was unregistered, but it was a powerful caucus that saw the women's voice solidified during the IPPG talks. And although I was the only woman in the Constitutional and Legal Committee of IPPG, working with the women outside Parliament and with one voice, we were able to get amendments to the Constitution to outlaw discrimination on basis of gender or sex, as was expressed in the Constitution then. We were also able to get a second amendment, which shared out all nominated seats, the 12 in Parliament and the many in the local authorities, equally between men and women. The specific provision was that there will be gender parity in nominations. Parity is equality. The law may not have been followed in exact terms, because in 1998, 5 women and 7 men were nominated. It ought to have been 6-6. We went to court, but nevertheless, the 5 nominated was an improvement from the single woman who used to be nominated when they feel like, not always, when patriarchy felt like. And for the first time in all local authorities, in all corners of Kenya, there were women nominated. At the same time, in 1998, the formal constitutional review process began. And following the pattern of IPPG, as women, with one voice, the political caucus, we came in. And when the legal framework for reviewing the constitution was being made, we were able to negotiate that all the organs of review must have 1/3 reserved for women. We also were able to negotiate space for people with disabilities. And if you go to the records, you see the first Constitution of Kenya Review Act, 1998, not the 97 one, 1998, reserving the 1/3 space in all the organs of review. And that's how the journey of women's reserved space in the Constitution came in. And that's how it culminated in the gains of 1/3 in the Constitution. Although those gains do not spell out how we achieve 1/3 in Parliament. But you can see in the local authority, in the county governments, it's well articulated, in the commissions, in public service. And I believe, because we are a nation of the rule of law, although we have failed ourselves twice, I believe Parliament will still have to provide for how we shall achieve the gender inclusivity in Parliament. We have fought many battles. They cannot all be detailed here, but I cannot say it's a journey I have walked alone. We have walked with the women and men of Kenya, because although it was women's inclusion and minorities and disabilities inclusion we were fighting for, we wouldn't have achieved without support of men who believed in inclusion. In Parliament, we were a minority. Even today, women are a minority. We need to continue with the partnership of the genders to achieve inclusivity, and especially gender inclusivity. Yeah.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. Tell us about what is the importance of the Surumeti Committee, the Bishop Surumeti. Does it have any bearing in terms of the women's struggle?
Yes, I said that in 1998, when the formal constitutional review process started, women went in as a constituency. Therefore, when the committee that would draft the legal framework for review was selected, when the plenary agreed that a 15-member committee be nominated, it was agreed at the outset the committee must have 1/3 women. I was the secretary of that committee. We were 2 joint secretaries, I and Professor Wanjiku Kabera. The committee had 5 women, 10 men. The 5 women were the 2 joint secretaries, I and Professor Kabera. There was Martha Kome, representing FIDA. There was Zipora Kitoni, representing Maendeleo ya Wanawake. The 5th woman, I would have to confirm whether it was, I believe it could have been Jane Kiano, but I'm not sure. But I can't remember completely the 5th woman, because I think I'm confusing with the nomination panel where Jane Kiano was. But we were 5 women, 15 men, and we are the ones who, after receiving the contribution from the groups in the plenary, who came up with the 3-tier organ of review, which was starting at the county level. There was the commissioners, there was the National Delegates Conference, and there was Parliament. That was the 3-tier structure, and a people participatory approach. Remember, the plenary had NGOs, it had Kenyans of all walks of life, it had religious groups, all those. And that 15-member committee was chaired by Bishop Philip Surumeti, who was representing the religious constituency. And at that time, women worked very closely with the religious community, with people living with disabilities, with NGOs, and also with political parties, especially opposition parties. And that's how the women's voice, added with its partners, was able to carry the day. So all the gains we have made as women in this country, we have made together with partners who are from all walks of life, and it has been a partnership of the genders, of both men and women, who want positive development in this country. And positive development must include inclusion. And inclusion today remains a thorny issue. Yeah.
Maybe taking you back to the League of Kenyan Women Voters.
Yeah.
What role did you play in the formation or establishment of the League?
We were the founding members, and I was the founder chair and stayed chair for 10 years. Then I handed over to Ida Odinga. The League was a multi-party organization. Some of my board members were members of KANU then, like Catherine Yamato, like Phoebe Asio, like Professor Julia Ojambo, all those were members of KANU. We were trying to say as women, our bonds are across the party line, and we should concentrate on what binds us. And then when we go to our parties, we take the good information or the resolutions that we have. And that holds good even today. Women's exclusion extends even to specific, their political parties. So we should bulk our voices together, solidify our voices together, so that as we go to our political parties, we get space as women. Yeah.
What happened was when we were discussing with Ida Odinga,
Yeah.
she talked like the League was, you wanted the League to become like a political party for women.
No. I handed over to the League to her in May of 2013, when it was still a civil society organization for women, a women's political lobby. If they had thoughts of converting it into a party after I left, she would be best suited to handle that. But it was a political lobby group. We never belonged to the same political party with her. We came to belong to one party in 2002, 10 years later, during the NAC, the National Rainbow Coalition. Yet she was my treasurer in the League. She belonged to Ford Kenya. I had gone to Fauda Sili and then migrated to DP. Can you see that we were on opposing sides? And all that time I remained chair of the League. She also was in various political parties, in Ford Kenya first, then in NDP. Then we again converged as LDP, and then we converged again as the National Rainbow Coalition. So the League was a multi-party forum for women. And the League, during my tenure, even had a memorandum of understanding with Maendeleo, the largest women organization, and we worked with them on civic education. And that is what even enabled us to form the Women's Political Caucus. Remember I said Maendeleo had been affiliated by KANU. This is the time Maendeleo came back from political affiliation to become a women's organization. It revived and claimed its space once again. Yeah.
Yes. Mheshimiwa, I just wanted to ask, is this story that we read about, there was a time that the negotiation about making the new constitution had stalled.
In Naivasha?
So we wanted just to, what was the
You know, we
experience?
can't give you every detail because there are two constitutions. There is the 205 referendum where women were split according to their political affiliation. Women affiliated to opposition that time, which was, it was not really opposition, it was part of government and opposition, who are in the orange, were saying no to the constitution. Women affiliated to the banana, to the then Kibaki side, we were on one side. So for the first time in constitution making, women were split along political lines. But women found their voice once again when, after the coalition government came into place, women coalesced once again and started pushing for their agenda. And therefore, when we went to negotiate in Naivasha, because I've always, since 1998, I had always played a central role in Parliament in the constitutional review, not just as a minister when I was, but also as a member of Parliament. So I remained for all those years in the Constitutional Review Committee of Parliament. So in 2010, when we went to negotiate in Naivasha, our male colleagues were not agreeing to have the quotas in the Constitution. They had no problem with the quotas at the county assembly level, but they didn't want in Parliament and in Senate. And the review process was almost breaking because of that and other issues. And I remember when everybody was very exhausted, I and the current deputy president sat together and made a consent on 5 issues, which when we went to the plenary were accepted. But before then, when the disagreement was very hot, women from across the party divide, we walked out because we were not going to be party to excluding women from the new constitution, their political participation. So when we could find no common ground, at the end of the day, we were able to sit with the Deputy President, William Ruto, and we came up with 5 consents. One of them was to have 16 women in Senate. It was not a percentage of anything, it's just a random figure we picked. And we also agreed on having TSC entrenched in the Constitution because it was a thorny issue, and we thought it would be foolhardy to have all the teachers against the Constitution in the referendum. We also appeased the religious community, which never worked at the end of the day, but we appeased them by putting abortion, the objection to abortion in the Constitution, which we did not think was a constitutional issue and we were opposed to. But we put it in terms that compromised both sides. It was a compromise. That abortion is not, life begins at conception. Abortion is not allowed except if the mother's life is in danger, which are matters that don't usually go to the Constitution, but we took it as a compromise so that we can move forward. Unfortunately, the church was not satisfied with that. We also retained the Catholic court because you remember the religious community wanted them out. And we were saying the Constitution was there to expand rights, not to take away rights from any group. So there were several things. There was even one compromise we were not happy about, but it was allowed. But I will not say that this one we negotiated, because personal law was not coming into play in the issue of rights in the previous constitution. But Muslim women were tied in the Bill of Rights that personal law will be accommodated. So it was a mixed bag, but I wanted to say that there were some issues we retreated and agreed after disagreement and after a walkout by women. And I must say thanks go to the leadership of our committee, which was Abdikadir and Abab Namwamba, because they guided for the not more than 2/3 gender rule to be included, and a clause mandating Parliament to make a law to ensure that Parliament, which is National Assembly and Senate, complied with that rule. And they were supposed to do that within 5 years. We are actually in utter disobedience of the Constitution, and as a nation, we must ask ourselves, what do we need to do to comply with the document that we made? You cannot talk of amending or doing away with the rule before even complying with it. And women are part of this country. So when I hear people saying that Parliament is going to be bloated, it's already bloated and it's men who feel it. So it's actually a discriminatory way of arguing. When room is being made for women, you talk of being bloated. When already the 349, over 280 are men. So who is bloating? When all the jobs, new jobs created by the Constitution, in the county assemblies, in the county governments, a majority are filled by men. So if we want to downsize, the best way to do it would be to adopt a different election system, the one of, what do we call it, the one which is being adopted in the Scandinavian. We do away with first past the post, and we adopt proportional representation. Proportional representation brings near parity, and that's why South Africa is at near parity. That's why the Scandinavian nations are at near parity. And because Rwanda is adopting affirmative action and PR, that's why they have shot beyond parity to get women's dominance in parliament. We're not even seeking dominance. We are saying, let's come towards 50-50, which is the reality in life. Yeah. And let's also admit that talent resides in both men and women. And let's open doors to tap the best talent in this country from both genders. Let's abandon gender-based violence and violence during elections, because those are some of the things that discourage women. And that's abandon vote buying. That also discourages women. And political parties must take the lead. Yeah. I think I have to say now that's enough. I had given you 15 minutes, you have taken 30, because you should have come with sharp questions that take your 15. Unless if you have one winding one, I'm done.
Actually, Mashibua, you start all the questions. It is like you knew what you are looking for.
Okay.
Because actually what you discussed is actually what we were supposed to ask you.
Yeah.
And very grateful you've not even asked two questions but you've answered.
Just a closing remark. That we complain it's the male-dominated parliament that is not passing the law. But I want as women for us to step back and to take account of our actions. And every woman who is in parliament or is in a position of leadership and decision making, ask yourself, what have you done to advance the cause of women? Because today, I'm working so that my daughter and my grandchild do not have to pass through the thorny path that I have passed. When a woman is in a position of leadership and decision making at whatever level, what have you done to contribute? Or do you get there and get this sense of entitlement and think that it's your effort alone that got you there, and you forget to look back and hold the hands of others? Even if it's your education and you passed the interview, remember there was your mother and women around you as you grew up who have acted as your role models. We all owe a debt to society that brought us up. To both men and women who have been our role models, we also owe that debt to society, to bring up others and to lend them a hand. Yeah.
Can I shoot just one?
Yeah.
One?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe what was your experience with the Fungamano process and maybe mobilizing women?
May I say that I never became part of the Fungamano process. The Fungamano process was I am talking of two Fungamanos. Yes. The Fungamano process that came in before the IPPG. You know that was an NGO process for advocating for constitutional review before the formal process began. I did not go to Fungamano, although my party leader Kibaki went. I chose to remain in parliament and we came up with the IPPG, which got that breakthrough in 1997. The second Fungamano process was when the Kanu government refused to accept the nominees for women commissioners, which caused a split in the formal constitutional review process. And the government of the day superimposed their own women commissioners. And therefore the opposition and civil society refused to go to that constitutional review process and now build their own review process in Ufungamano, an alternative process. That process we were all part of as the opposition, and the women commissioners we had nominated, namely Professor Wanjiku Kabira, Nancy Barasa, Phoebe Asio, Salome Muigai, Abida Ali, were our commissioners at Ufungamano. The political parties had also the commissioners who had been chosen. And there were two review processes. which were then to be joined together when the KANU government realized they cannot go anywhere without bringing the country together. They brought in Professor Yash Paul Guy around 1999. The two processes were joined. Is it 2009? 1999, it was about 2000, because he managed to join the two processes by 2001. That's how now, again, the formal review process started officially when Professor Guy joined the two processes. Because a formal process boycotted by half the country is not a process. So when I talk of ufungamano, there are two ufungamanos. An ufungamano looking for the KANU government to agree to a formal review process, that's pre-1998, which I didn't go to because I was part of the IPPG. And another one, when the review process split after the commissioners, women commissioners were named. And here again, this was a momentous occasion for women because we were resisting being forced to nominate women who the male politicians would have favored. We nominated women, not from men's pocket, but women whom women had nominated. And we had done that together as women from all political divides, because in that nomination committee, I was chairing it. Martha Kome was the secretary. Among my members was Jane Kiano, Sipora Kitoni. There was, am I forgetting some of my members? Julia Ojambo. I'm not able to give all the names, but those were some of my members. Yeah, and we were even taken to court by fellow women, sponsored by the government, and we defeated them. And I do remember the CS for Defense, Rachel Mamo, was our lead lawyer in court. And she did ask the judge to send the ladies home, the ladies who were protesting the very good nomination of the women commissioners. And indeed, they were sent home, and we were given costs, which we never collected. It's been a very interesting time. There is so much detail, I can't give you anymore. Please, I have to send you home as well.